And now let's get into the conversation for today. Now, the Nigerian Senate has taken a decisive step in addressing the country's economic challenges by meeting with President Tinubu's economic team for a crucial meeting. This move comes in the wake of mounting concerns over Nigeria's economic challenges such as food insecurity, foreign exchange volatility, and the depreciation of the naira. The Senate's decision to engage the economic team underscores the importance of the situation and the need for concerted efforts to navigate the prevailing hardship.
When exchange rate moves, it also has consequential effect on other prices, particularly fuel prices, electricity subsidy, that we hope this will abate so that it will not even complicate the budget implementation process. But with your support, the country is turning the bend. Measures that have been taken, of which the budget and economic planning has been invited to all meetings by the coordinating Minister of the Economy, both in infrastructure, agriculture, power interventions. I'm sure the results will be seen immediately.
On the issue of value of exchange rate, when is it going to go down? Well, the answer is I really can't tell you, other than to say that I do believe that once all these various measures kick in, there will be price discovery that will indeed be one that makes sense for everybody. But having said that, I think I also have to say something very important that hopefully should buttress the issue of the value of the naira and really where we all stand. And that is, as I said earlier, that is definitely not the exclusive preserve of the central bank. It is not. And we all have a responsibility in ensuring that demand and supply, we are working as much as possible on supply, but on the demand side, we do have to all moderate our various interests on that to ensure that demand begins to come to a level that is sustainable.
A question was asked, are the grains available? I would say yes. The ones that we're about to release are available. And what measures are we to take to make sure that it is not siphoned or diverted?
A complete team, you must say it. Look at the Agric Minister, of course. You also have the Budget Minister there, and of course the CPN and the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister. All, it's a part, you must call it. But to discuss this, I'm joined by Senior Economist at Steers, Mrs. Dumebi Oluwole. He joins me virtually now. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Oluwole. We appreciate you for coming on board.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So key figures such as the Minister of Finance, I'm sure you saw him there, the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Edwan, the Central Bank Governor, Mr. Olayemi Kadoso, Mr. Bagudu, among other key members of the economic team. What is your understanding of this crucial meeting and specifically some of the highlights of the meeting?
I would say that the meeting happening now is a welcome development simply because it is clear that there is a state of crisis and the key policy makers or policy implementers are actually trying to, put heads together to come up with a resolve on how we can move forward and change the course of things that are currently happening in the country, especially from the monetary side of things, as it has now become the crux of the entire economy, speaking specifically to inflationary pressures and exchange rate depreciation. I would also say that it does somewhat signal that it signals some level of, I would say, it does have a little of a positive signal that it shares to, or it disperses to the foreign exchange markets and general investor, business and consumer confidence that, okay, they're having these conversations to sort the current problems that Nigeria is facing today. However, with the sort of questions, with the entire, I would say, with the entire aura of the meeting, you can tell that there's still some level of panic, right? And that's also it can be read off in a good and in a bad way. And in the bad way, I would say, if policymakers are are in panic mode, that panic mode will actually, send jitters to the forex markets, and then we could see some level of negative responses in how the exchange rate market behaves, and even towards inflationary pressure, just simply because there's somewhat of panic going even from the head of the economy down to the normal commodity markets or even the exchange rate markets. But the overall thing is, it's happening at a time where it is very necessary. So that is what I believe the markets will definitely take away from the meeting. And in terms of key highlights, I will say that clearly the exchange rate is the most paramount issue, as it should be, considering how fast it has depreciated just in January alone, and the recent reforms that the CBN has also taken to address price pressures. I will also say that it also, with some of the issues that were raised and how some of the policymakers, especially from the Senate committee, with how they believe the CBN should act and respond to some of these macroeconomic shocks that we've seen, it does show some level of disconnect between how policies should actually be implemented and the kind of policies that Nigeria needs to actually adopt today. An example would be a question on how, on the fact that Nigeria should, stop importing goods. There is that misconception that Nigeria is highly import dependent. While it could be true for some commodities, when we net it off, we see that there's a reason why we are actually import dependent. There's a reason why we're importing these commodities. And until we do hear from both fiscal authorities, the Senate committee, the CBN, until we hear the fact that policymakers are trying to address the root cause of Nigeria's problems, then I think the market will actually respond more positively, and there'll be more optimism and boost in confidence levels.
Well, I'm optimistic that perhaps this courtship between the Senate and, of course, the economic team will yield positive results. But specifically, I mean, you talked about the FX market crises or issues. Specifically, the Apex Bank Governor, Mr. Cardoso, did talk about that the CBN does not have the ability to intervene, and that it is not in the place of CBN to continue to intervene in the market every time. So how is this refocus of its objectives likely to impact the FX market going forward? Already, the CBN said it's beginning to record some success in the FX market reforms.
Yeah. I would say that it's very good to hear the CBN saying that, and this is because we're coming from an almost decade long, wrong behavior, wrong policy directives, or I would say, yes, wrong monetary policy directives from the CBN. But coming from a world where the CBN was actively involved in ways and means advances, intervening in the FX market, capital controls. So all of that put together has actually come now to bite the economy in a very negative and painful way. So we're having these corrective measures from the CBN, and the beginning of it all is the CBN outrightly stating what it should be doing and what it is not supposed to do. So this signals to the market a CBN that is focused on its true functions as the banker to the government, as the banker of banks rather, and to focus on its core responsibility of addressing price and exchange rate stability. So in the real sense, this is the right way that the CBN is supposed to, actually address the monetary policy crisis that the country has been facing for a very long time. The key thing, though, is in times of crisis, it is actually somewhat expected that the CBN will intervene from time to time. It's not supposed to be an everyday thing, and clearly the CBN going in this particular route of sticking to its core functions. Number one, it helps to create the right sense of incentives to the market. There is now direction. There's policy direction, and that's what that does is it reduces uncertainty in the FX market. This is because now market participants are clear on the policy directives the CBN is going to take. They've already started with some of the reforms that they've taken, with some of the complementary measures that they've taken to complement the reforms that happened in June 2023. So with the CBN governor now actually reiterating this, what it does is that it sends a very positive signal in terms of certainty and policy direction. The other thing that it does is it allows the reforms to take place. We've taken up reforms, and the CBN making sure that it's not intervening too much. It's going to allow price discovery and market and allow the market to correct itself towards equilibrium. This is because the market demand and supply will now be the determining factors of the exchange rate.
Well, we'll get back to that in a moment. But on food inflation, the CBN has reiterated that inflation will moderate to 21.4% in the year, but they didn't mention when exactly. But let's talk more about food inflation. The federal government, as you're aware, has ordered the release of grains from the national reserves. How significant is this step in taming food inflation, which is now at 33%?
Yeah. I would say it's we're addressing the symptoms by doing that. And that's not to say it's not a welcome development. It is good, considering the fact that we've seen protests erupt, especially in the northern part of the country. That's very, very, where we have predominantly Nigeria's multidimensionally poor, and they are more at risk of food insecurity. So it is a welcome development. But it is very important to highlight the fact that policymakers need to stop addressing the symptoms of market dysfunctionalities and structural rigidities. We need to focus on the root cause of Nigeria's inflationary problems today. And the key thing here is we're not producing enough to feed the nation. So why are we not producing enough to feed the nation? Farmers are not able to go to their farms. Why are they not able to go to their farms? Insecurity. So if we address the issue of insecurity, we will be able to see a substantial increase or substantial boost to food production in Nigeria. Aside that, when we even produce, there is wastage. We're seeing post-harvest losses for commodities that people consume on a daily basis, like tomatoes, yam, onions, of over 45 to 50% on a daily for these particular commodities. Meaning that we don't produce enough, and yet more than half of what we produce is wasted because we do not have adequate storage facilities. This is where the federal government needs to spend and needs to focus its attention on. How do we preserve what we've produced? The third thing is distribution costs. Because of the increase in petrol prices, bringing the less food or the lower food, the reduced food we've produced down to other parts of the country, like the south, the southwest, and even the southeast, is proving very difficult, simply because of a lot of informal taxation that goes on the road and the increase in fuel costs. And the reason why this is as bloated as it is because we do not have functioning rail systems. Typically, we should have railway systems to easily transport food from the north to the other parts of the country, but that's not in place. Again, this is where the federal government needs to spend this money on. And the key thing I want to highlight here is that we have two arms of the government, or two arms of policymakers that should be able to consolidate: monetary policy and fiscal policy. On the monetary policy side of things, there's a lot of corrective measures happening, trying to clear the market dysfunctionalities and disequilibrium that has happened for the past 8 to 10 years. On the fiscal side of things, while we're hearing a lot of moves like, okay, we're giving palliatives, we're doing this, we're only seeing the federal government address the symptoms of the key problems that Nigeria is facing today. We have to boost productivity, and that can only happen when we sort out the issues that are stifling productivity. Infrastructure as well is a very big thing. I did hear in the Senate briefing and the roundtable conversation that they're planning to focus on focus on building some roads and stuff. And while that is good, we need to focus on the roads that do matter. Lagos Ibadan Expressway has been in construction for God knows how long. We've pumped a lot of money in there. Still, the roads are still, they're still in construction. There's still a lot of issues going on there. Third Mainland Bridge, the same thing. And then when you consider the other roads, very bad roads are coming from Plateau State towards Lagos, coming from Kogi State towards Lagos, coming from Benue State towards Lagos. And those are the key food producing states of the country. So addressing those issues are a meaningful way for the government to spend. Another thing is for us to actually focus on reducing the cost of governance, to be very honest. Nigeria is not earning enough because we're not producing enough. Our key sources of government revenue, crude oil, non-oil exports, we're seeing significant distortions in the production of these particular commodities. I've spoken about the things that feed into food inflation. But still, we also have to consider the fact that cost of governance has to be lean so that we're able to even conserve the fiscal resources that we have to pump into these other aspects of the economy. We can't always rely on external borrowings to sort out our domestic problems.
And talking about the cost of governance, there's also cost of living. Let's talk about the cost of living for instance. The House of Representatives advised the federal government to address the rising cost of living in the country. And in response, of course, beyond palliative measures of the federal government. So I'm thinking, just wondering, how do you see the government's reform impacting on growth? That is one. Secondly, I think they also highlighted today at the meeting, they highlighted how the salary should be reviewed, because the federal government did talk about how they are going to review salary from this year, but there's no timeline to that yet. So today the Senate raised that issue. So do you think review of salary will bring down the cost of living in Nigeria? Perhaps when you boost the purchasing power of average Nigeria, that of course will impact a bit on inflation, and again will also impact on the cost of living. So how does this work economically?
So I'll say it's in two ways, right? There is the aspect of an increase in wages that should be able to increase, and this is theory now. If wages increase side by side inflation, disposable income should also still be, should increase as well. So people are able to meet their basic needs and actually shield themselves from the increase in the cost of living. But we also have to face the market realities on ground. If we decide to review salaries upward, depending on by how much the government is trying to look at this, and by salaries, I believe that they're referring to salaries of the average Nigerian. The question is, who will pay it? Businesses are not producing enough. The same issues that are affecting households are also affecting businesses, even double, because their cost of production is significantly high. If they are not able to produce enough, their output is low. There's no economies of scale. If there's no economies of scale, they cannot employ. And if they cannot employ, they clearly cannot even pay the wages of people that are already existing in their companies. And that's the true reality of what is happening in the country. Not even to mention that we have more SMEs in the country than multinationals. Right. So if you have SMEs in the country, how can they scale up to actually employ more people or even increase the wages of people that are already existing in their companies? Right. So we can... Again, it speaks to the disconnect that I was talking about earlier between the, I would say, between the some of policymakers and the people. So when I spoke about the cost of governance, it might be very basic, but it is the actual truth. Someone that is earning over 2.4 million naira, or about 7 million naira in a month, cannot confidently say they understand the issues of someone that is earning 30,000 naira a month. Rent costs have increased, food prices have increased, transportation costs has increased, and this same 30,000 naira or 33,000 naira, even if you increase it to 50 naira, inflation is taking over 30% of that out. So, and the simple thing is increase productivity. Let us focus on the root cause of the problem.
Right.
When we do that, we'll begin to see all of this trickle down to businesses expanding and employing more people. It's not rocket science. It's just political. It's how political economy intertwines with the macroeconomy. If policies are set up, there is a time lag between when those policies will actually take effect to bring about the outcomes that we need. But then again, they have to be the right set of policies.
It's all right. I think a good place to leave it. Thank you so much for your time. Senior economist at Steers, Mrs. Dumebi Oluwole. Thank you for coming on Business Nigeria. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.